Good evening and welcome to New York Buddha Dharma. We're going to continue on through the teachings on the Bardos, the Tibetan Buddhist teachings on death, and the intervals. The six main intervals of life and death. Tonight we're continuing on through what's called the Chikai Bardo, the painful Bardo of dying, which begins when we contract the condition that is going to end our life and ends with the end of our life, when we finally die. And this process proceeds in stages. The first part of it is the falling away of what's called the coarse body, which means this physical body. And then the second part is the falling away of the subtle body. The coarse body is described in terms of the 5 elements, or actually, let's say 4 of them. Earth, water, fire, and wind. And then also space. Now, what you might think of is, this sounds sort of primitive, like a sort of primitive, science, that all things are made up of these 5 elements: earth, water, fire, wind, and space. But actually, what they are is a description of our experience as it arises and passes away in this present moment. Earth refers to the solidity, the heaviness aspect of this experience. Water has to do with the fluidity of it, that things flow in the present moment. Fire has to do with the fact that things have heat, and by heat we mean not only literal heat, temperature, but also the color, the vividness of the way in which everything communicates to us. There's a kind of heat. And wind is the quality, again, of movement, very fast, rapid movement, and accomplishment of one thing or another. And that these qualities, and then space, is the quality of accommodation. It accommodates everything. Things arise and pass away, arise in, out of space, and pass away back into it. So it's the accommodator. And these 5 qualities characterize our way of describing what we experience in this present moment, which is the only time that we actually ever have. And when we die, these are what are passing away, these 5 qualities, one by one. The first stage of death is earth dissolving into water, it's called. And each one of these stages has a number of key characteristics that are described in the process. We're still talking about the coarse body, which you might think of as your physical body, although it's actually a bit more than that. And the first of them is that as Earth passes away, there are some key landmarks. Let's see, I'll look at this. I gave you this crib sheet, and if people are out there listening to this talk and would like a copy of this little outline of the dissolution of the coarse body, you have to, if you email newyorkbuddhadharma@gmail.com, you can get a copy sent to you. So the first characteristic has to do with the chakra that comes undone. Now, remember that the inner body is made up of three elements primarily. The channels, which are called nadi in Sanskrit, sa in Tibetan, and there are thousands of channels, but there are three main channels. There are thousands of channels, they move throughout your body. And the three main channels go vertically along with the spine. One, the main channel of all, the central channel, is called the avaduti in Sanskrit, uma in Tibetan. And it goes from the crown of the head down below the secret center. The secret center is the center at your genitals. And this is also called the wisdom channel. And the wisdom winds flow in that, but also confused winds flow in there as well. The other two channels are confused channels, and they run to the right and left of the avaduti. The one to the right is called the rasana in Sanskrit, and it is red in color, and it goes from the secret center up through and comes out your nostril, so that wind moving in that channel, you breathe it out through the right nostril. The left one comes out the left nostril, and it's called the lalana. Supposedly, the winds of these two channels are hatred moves up through the lalana, and it's yellow in color, and desire moves up through the rasana, and it's red in color. And if you breathe out through both at once, you get a dark air, which represents the third poison, which is moha, which is often translated as ignorance, but it really means something more like indifference. You know, if you are caught up in dualism, I and other, then there are these three poisons are active. They characterize the relationships that I and other can have. And if you regard other as being dangerous or inimical to the existence of I, then you want to push it away, and that's hatred, the left channel, the wind of the left channel. If you regard it as something that augments the existence of me, I, then you want to pull it towards you, and that's desire. And if it's indifferent, then you get the third poison, which is indifference, sometimes translated as ignorance. But that's, I think, is a faulty translation, because ignorance is usually also used to translate avidya, which is the fundamental confusion, unenlightenment. Avidya means not seeing, literally, in Sanskrit, Maurikpa in Tibetan. So the first thing that happens is this dissolution of earth into water, is that the chakra at the navel center here begins to come undone and to dissolve. Lots of channels come out, radiate out from this chakra. Not only the three main ones, but channels go out throughout your whole body. And they begin to come undone, come untied. The outer sign of this dissolution of earth into water is first a growing heaviness. And as it continues, so that your body becomes very heavy, it's hard to move. You can see this in people who are very ill and dying. They have difficulty moving. In fact, it comes along with aging as well. And then as it continues, there's a feeling of dissolution, of the body dissolving. We lose physical strength. We lose balance. And the body might begin to appear to become smaller or thinner, and begin to leak bodily fluids. The first consciousness to dissolve is the I consciousness, which is the most important, and vision becomes blurry and distorted. The wisdom that begins to come undone, and there is a wisdom associated with each one of these five elements. They all correspond, you see, to the Buddha families to some degree. The wisdom is the mirror-like wisdom. That's the wisdom, the intelligence that can see how things are put together and come apart. This is corresponding to the Vajra family. And there's an inner sign, which is that our mind feels heavy and listless. Perception dims. Appearances become unclear, murky, as though there were not enough light in the room. And then there is the secret sign, which is very interesting. And this has to do with luminosity. And we begin to see visions if we're attuned to it. And many, many people are. This is not an extraordinary thing. And the vision, or the secret sign that's connected with this first dissolution, is that we begin to see sort of dreams, mirage-like appearances that are perceived for an instant or for several moments. They're clearly illusory, but still they can be very vivid. Then as the death process continues, the second stage is the dissolution of water into fire. Earth is now dissolved into water. And now water is going to dissolve into fire. The heart chakra begins to come untied. And the outer sign is the sensation of being inundated by water. The body begins to dry out. The mouth, the nose, and the tongue may feel very dry, and the person may want water to be given to them as the body loses fluids, and they might feel very thirsty. The sense consciousness that begins to go is that of hearing. Hearing becomes dimmer. And the wisdom that is beginning to dissolve is the wisdom of equanimity, and you begin to feel more agitated. You begin to feel less calm. The inner sign is that the mind becomes increasingly unclear. The heart chakra, you see, is connected very much to the mind. And in Indian and Tibetan physiognomy, the mind resolves here in the heart center. Consciousness becomes vague and foggy as the heart chakra dissolves, and mind may become even more restless and agitated. Emotions are easily provoked, and we may become upset or angry quickly. We see this in the ill, but in the dying it is stronger yet. The secret sign that a person may see, a vision, that the bystanders can't see, but only the person who's dying can, is an appearance like smoke, clouds, or steam. It's less solid than the previous mirage, less tangible. The third dissolution is fire into wind. And this has to do with the dissolving of the throat chakra. And when each one of these elements dissolves, first it intensifies and then it dissolves. So at first, you might begin to experience an increase in warmth, a feeling of feverishness. And then there's a loss of bodily heat, and the body begins to feel cold and numb as heat escapes through the breath, which becomes progressively colder, as well as through the pores of our skin. This heat loss begins at the extremities and moves towards the heart. First the hands and feet, and then the limbs get stiff and cold. The consciousness, or the sense awareness that begins to dissolve at this point is that of smell and taste. Those. And the wisdom, or the intelligence that begins to go, is the ability of mind to perceive the differences in the way things appear and present, the difference in colors and shapes, and the way things are characterize themselves as they present to you. The inner sign is that the clarity of mind fluctuates, alternating between clear and unclear and dullness. It is as though sometimes we wake up and then we fall back into a state of dull perception, or even devoid of perception. We realize that we're losing touch with conscious experience, and we have difficulty recognizing people and external appearances altogether. The secret sign that one sees at this stage is sparks of fire, light like fireflies. fourth dissolution is of wind into consciousness. So fire is dissolved into wind, and now wind dissolves into consciousness or awareness. The secret chakra at the genitals here is dissolving. And the outer sign is that breath becomes markedly shorter. Breathing becomes more difficult. First, the person may start panting. There's an increase in breath, in wind. And then the breath becomes much more difficult and choppy. And exhalation may become longer than the inhalation, sometimes accompanied by rattling sound in the chest. The eyes start to roll upward, remaining there longer each time. The sense that disappears now, I said that I misspoke before, it was smell in the previous dissolution. This one is taste and touch are dissolving. And the wisdom that dissolves is the ability to accomplish anything, to do anything. This is a kind of intelligence, and that begins to go all together. Eventually, breathing stops. And from the perspective of the coarse dissolution process, death has arrived. And in fact, this is the point where Western medicine usually pronounces the person dead. The heart stops, breathing stops, the person flatlines. But this is only the cessation of the coarse body, the outer respiration. It is followed by the dissolution, leading to the cessation of the inner respiration, which leads to the actual point of death. At this point, the person is still not completely dead. Their body is, the coarse body, but the mind, the subtle body, is continuing. The inner sign of this dissolution of wind into consciousness is that our minds become extremely confused and unstable, increasingly unclear, and we are hallucinating. What hallucinations we see depend on our karma, the tendencies and the habits that we have developed in the past and which are stored in the unconscious. And those particular ones produce hallucinations. Each one of us has a different kind. So at this point, it's very helpful if we have in our lives, previous lives, been habituated to positive thinking, to being cheerful, because that will then affect the state of mind very powerfully that we have as we go through this stage. If we have been habituated to negative thoughts, depression, anger, that will produce very unpleasant hallucinations. And these mental phenomena will arise more vividly than ordinary thoughts, and so they'll have a powerful effect on us. Yeah, it says that these kinds of thoughts have less effect on us during our lives than they do at this point, because right now we're losing touch with the body. The body and the physical world ground us. So when we get lost in dreams during our normal life, the physicality of the world and our bodies pull us back out of those dreams. Right now, we've lost touch with the body, so these dreams, these hallucinations that arise out of our subconscious, out of the alaya, it's actually called, the storehouse consciousness. But you can think of it as the unconscious or the subconscious in Freudian terms, are much more powerful and have a greater effect on us because we have no physical world to sober us up. The secret sign at this point is like a brightly shining torch or lamp, which augurs the actual rise of the ground luminosity which is coming. This is an experience of reality. Now, what is happening is that all that obscures the enlightened mind is beginning to fall away. Everything that has to do with samsara, including all of these thoughts that come out of the alaya. And at this point, the physical body has completely shut down. But what hasn't shut down is the mind. And by mind, I mean at this point, the neurotic mind. The enlightened mind never shuts down. It's just here. It's always, just as right now, you can't shut off your awareness of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mental events. You're always aware of something. That clear, easy, natural awareness is always with us. But it's clouded over by neurotic or samsaric mind, which is full of thoughts and emotions. And we get lost in our thoughts and our worries and our thoughts about ourselves and others. What begins to fall away now is that whole neurotic apparatus. And it falls away primarily in 3 stages. The inner subtle body. This has to do with what's going on in the central avaduti, this wisdom channel here. There are basically 3 kinds. There are how many? 40, 33, right, and 7. 80 kinds of mental events. There are different schemes for it. In this particular Tibetan scheme, they use a scheme that came from India from a particular school called the Sarvastivada school, and they use 80 mental events. Other schools have different counts. It doesn't really matter. And these 80 mental events are divided again along the lines of the 3 poisons. So there are 33 that are connected with hatred, and they are connected with the crown of the head. There are 40 that are connected with desire, and they are connected with and reside in the secret center, down here below near the genitals. And then there are 7 which have to do with indifference or ignorance and moha, and they live in the heart. And what happens is, the way that this is described, what's beginning to happen, you see, is that this neurotic mind is falling away. It's dissolving. And when you sit and you meditate and you come back into the present moment, you dissolve it as well. But you don't dissolve it as completely as is happening now at the moment of, you approach the final moment of death. And what begins to happen is, first of all, the 33 thoughts connected with aggression or hatred move down the central channel from the crown of the head. There's a seed syllable, they say up there, called a hum, which is upside down in the way they draw it. And from that, these 33 thoughts move down, and one experiences a kind of white light appearing, and it colors your consciousness. Secondarily, the 40 thoughts connected with passion move up from the secret center towards the heart center. And one experiences a red light like sunset. The white light is kind of like the dawn, but the red light is like the sun going down at night. And you're experiencing this glow. And then these 2 lights meet in the heart, and they produce a black or a very, very dark light. It's kind of like seeing the night sky in the middle of the night with no stars, just a blackness. And that is the falling away of ignorance. At this point, with all of these confused thoughts having died, for an instant or more, what is revealed is what is called the ground luminosity. That is the pure awareness of enlightened mind. Because all of the things which obscure it have fallen away. It's there in everybody, that enlightened mind. It's called Buddha nature, Tathagata Garbha. It's called all kinds of things. It's called Rigpa. It's called Tamagishepa. It's this natural, inborn, fundamental awareness that all sentient beings have. And it is obscured during the course of our life by all of the thoughts that we have about I and other. Now, at the point of death, the final death, the death of the mind, there is nothing more to obscure them. And if one has practiced enough during one's life, what practice is, you see, is the recreation of that experience, or the what's the word for it? Not recreation. It's tuning into that awareness, that pure awareness, that ground luminosity. There are a number of ways that one can become familiar with it. The most common is that you have it pointed out to you by another human being, and this is what the main function of a teacher is in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and also in the Zen tradition, or in all Buddhist traditions. The main function of the teacher is to point out this ground luminosity, this fundamental nature of our awareness. Once that's pointed out, then the student, the practitioner, begins to take that as the path. And what that means is that when they sit down to meditate, they see their thoughts, they let them go, and they come back to that ground luminosity that was shown to them, that easy, open, clear, effortless, fundamental aspect of their own intelligence. That begins to become the practice. Prior to that, you practice in ways that following instructions, having to do this and that. But once that's been pointed out, then the person can come back to it in their practice. And if the person has done enough of that during their lifetime, then when this happens naturally at the point of death, and the ground luminosity becomes revealed, it's very powerfully recognized. And they say that it's like a child recognizing its mother. The child, you see, is the sort of artificial aspect of the practice that we've done during our lifetimes, where there's a watcher saying, now you're doing it, now you're not. Come back, to your awareness. And when the moment of death occurs, that child luminosity recognizes the real thing very powerfully arising. And they say that it can be, if you've done enough practice, like a child leaping into its mother's lap. That the sort of the practice that you've developed during your lifetime joins with the reality that's revealed at the point of death. This is called the moment of Dharmakaya awareness. Dharmakaya is absolute reality. So we've gone through the coarse process, dissolution process, and the subtle dissolution process, having to do with confused mind disappearing. There are three terms, by the way, that are used to describe this disappearance of the confused mind: appearance, increase, and attainment. And the appearance is the falling away of sort of subject-object awareness. Increase is the falling away of concept. Concept is what we apply to subject and object. We say, that's a chair, this is me, and all of that begins to fall away. And attainment is the actual experience of awareness. The Dharmakaya awareness is expressing mind's empty essence and its radiant energy and its unceasing display of awareness. These are actually the three kayas. And they all appear in order. If, in fact, actually, if you recognize this ground luminosity at this point, the whole process of death is over. And there are no more Bardos. If you don't, if you miss it, and most people do, see, most people haven't trained properly or enough in this lifetime to be able to recognize it. And so it goes by in a finger snap. for the majority of human beings or sentient beings. And they don't see it, the ground luminosity. They don't see the mother luminosity. And they go right into the next Bardo. And if they've practiced enough again in this lifetime, they might see the second Bardo of death, which is the Bardo of reality. And that we're going to talk about in next week and in subsequent weeks. And this is the Sambhogakaya awareness, where they begin to see the energies of life revealed, both confused and enlightened. But they've missed that first opportunity, and now there's another opportunity. It just gets a little harder. And then if they miss that, and again, most sentient beings do, because they haven't trained, they haven't meditated on reality, then they will pass into the third of the death bardos, which is the Bardo of becoming. And this is connected with the Nirmanakaya, which has to do with the appearances of the world arising. And we begin to move towards rebirth. The practice that we do here, where we sit, here's the practice that we do before we have a talk, and what we do here in meditation. And we bring our minds into this present moment. And we let go of thoughts of the past and the future. And we're just right here in the space of this moment, now, this room, this place. We can do it anytime, right now. Just come present. That is the practice that prepares us to see reality at the moment of death and after. And then if we go out with the breath into this space, we follow the breath out, and the breath goes out, it dissolves as it goes, and at the end of the out-breath, there's just this. That is the awareness that prepares us to recognize the moment of reality at the moment of death, at the moment of the cessation of the mind. Constantly coming present, constantly letting go of thoughts of the past and the future, which always have to do with I and other, which are always lit by anxiety about me. And when we let that go, and we come back into the present, totally relaxed, aware, awake, that is the preparation for death. That is the way to live a great life, and it's the way to experience a good death. And more than that, what's even harder, Trungpa Rinpoche, my teacher, used to exhort us. He used to say, please cheer up. Please cheer up. It's essential that this space is lit with cheer, with delight, with curiosity, with a constant feeling of willingness to engage with whatever appears and be part of it. The accounts of people going into death, enlightened people going into death, are various. Trungpa Rinpoche said of Suzuki Roshi that he died like a true Buddhist. And when someone asked him what that meant, he said he was curious about his own death. So curiosity is an aspect of enlightened mind. And in fact, it is an aspect of enlightened mind. Prajna, which means transcendent knowledge at the earlier stage of the path, in the Vajrayana actually becomes curiosity. Can you believe? It's like wanting to explore this world. Other people are described, enlightened people, as going into death joyfully, with happiness. For them, there is no death. It's just a continuation of this present moment. This present moment is full of change, right? Right now we're sitting in this room listening to this talk. In a minute we'll get up and walk out and we'll go into the night. There's constant change in the present moment. That's the way that we can experience death, as just another change, that we're still just resting in awareness of this present moment and things changing. This body's falling away, the world is changing. And so my friend Don Milani described the Karmapa, the head of the Kagyu sect, when he was dying, as putting his hand on Don's head. Don was crying at his hospital bed. sitting on the floor, and he felt a hand on his head, and he looked up, and the Karmapa had his hand on Don's head, and he said, "Don't worry, nothing happens." Another approach. And we're just resting in this space, and all these changes, nothing's really happening, just changes in stuff coming and going. No big deal. So having good cheer is so important. And I always tell that story about my friend Michael Cohen going to Trungpa Rinpoche and telling him his father was dying in Chicago, and he was in Boulder, and he was going to Chicago to say goodbye, and asking Rinpoche what he could say to his dying father. And Rinpoche said, "You could tell him to cheer up." Isn't that a toughie? Pretty radical. So it's enjoining us to really cheer up in our lives, come into this present moment. It can be so hard to do. And to live with awareness, real awareness of this moment now, letting go of all of our anxieties of the past and the future. They'll leave us anyhow, suddenly or gradually. I've got a friend who just died a sudden death. Wow.
Just what?
Huh?
A friend who just what?
Died a very, very sudden death. And the funny thing is, so he was my friend, and I just kind of emceed his funeral, non-Buddhist. And he had a country home, and he was there alone, expecting a visitor the next day. And no one knows exactly what happened. Perhaps he got up and put another log on the fire. When the visitor arrived in the morning, the house was burned to the ground, him in it. And then the funny thing is that I was watching this movie, Manchester by the Sea, and there's a scene in it. That's what happens. Exactly that. And it's frightening. So, I mean, I've been doing a lot of Tonglen, that's sending and taking, for my friend David. And when you do Tonglen, you're not taking on the person's illness or their physical pain or their loss. What you're taking on is their unhappiness. You're breathing that in on the in-breath. Their fear. They're wishing things were otherwise. And you're sending out to them, guess what? Cheer, awake, awareness, fearlessness, confidence. Because I imagine my friend, he went to bed and he woke up or came to dead. What must that be like? But there's so many people who experience sudden death. One way or another. So, it's good to prepare. And the best preparation is coming present. The other best preparation is to study this crib sheet that I gave you, and maybe I'll give you out another one for the dissolution of the mind. You know, the 3 kinds of thoughts dissolving. The Dalai Lama says that he studied this, and he used to say he studied it every day. That was years ago. I can't imagine he's still doing it, but maybe he is, because he wants to be prepared. He wants, as this process happens to him, he doesn't want to be frightened or surprised. He wants to say, oh yeah, there are the sparks that they talked about, the fireflies. Oh yeah, there's the smoke, the smoky appearance. Oh yes, my body is getting heavier right now. Oh yes, and I'm getting colder. So that he wouldn't be afraid and frightened. So that's it. If you'd like to discuss it, you're welcome to.
I have a few questions, starting with the last statement.
Here, go to use the microphone, Christine.
Starting with your last statement, if you lose your mind, how does the memory of the practice come in?
Because you're losing the thinking mind. And then I guess there's still intelligence, awareness going on.
Yeah, true. That
Yes.
truth is of at some point you've
No,
lost the
no.
need, didn't you?
What they say of that intelligence is that it knows itself. It's called Rigpa, and they say it has Runrik. That means it knows itself. It recognizes itself. That's why you can recognize that intelligence and know that it's there. It isn't neurotic mind that sees it. It's enlightened mind that sees itself and relaxes. Runrik.
It's other than awareness, other than the
It's what?
other than awareness. That intelligence is other than awareness.
It is awareness,
It is awareness.
but it contains within it all the most brilliant intelligence you have. Thought is just an echo of that intelligence. Thought is a repeating of, oh yeah, there's Lane. But your intelligence already saw it and knew it.
So, in other words, what the Dalai Lama was practicing, in a way, was not needed because intelligence already knows it doesn't need the reminder, right?
Well, I guess he was preparing for the worst, that he wouldn't recognize that ground luminosity, that he would still have some thoughts, going on, and or that, that they would resume, and so he was preparing to help himself not be afraid.
To me, it sounds contradictory because if that intelligence stays with you, then you don't need the reminders, it seems to me. And if you look for reminders, then that defeats the statement that intelligence.
The intelligence,
stays with you.
the problem with it is that it gets clouded over by neurotic thought, by all our thoughts of I and other. It's like a figure ground problem. You see, that fundamental ground luminosity is the ground of our being. All the thoughts are little figures, like drawings on the piece of paper, or like birds going across the sky. And we tend to focus on the figures and lose track of the ground. That's what confusion and ignorance is all about. That's why what being lost in samsara, not being enlightened, means, is that we're focused on the figures, those thoughts, which are just like waves in the ocean. We've lost track of the ocean. We're following the waves. They're like birds going across the sky, clouds going across the sky. And we lose track of the sky itself, that blue, sunlit sky. And we focus on those little figures, and so we get lost.
Right, that's what we did all our life long, right?
Right?
That's what we did all our lives long.
Yes.
Yeah. So I thought that, anyway, to me there's still a contradiction at the end because, I guess I'm saying the same thing, is that intelligence being there, you would need reminders. In my mind, there's a contradiction. Do you understand?
You need reminders? That you need reminders, there's a contradiction? It's just like in life.
Yeah, okay, so we're going back to that. So, okay, so can I ask another question? Do you want to ask?
Go ahead
and use the mic if you're going to use a question. Ask a question.
I'm not sure this is a good comment or not. I've had a near-death experience which is very similar to, although I was prepared by anything just punch a little bit, as far as your intelligence not being there, I mean, from what I remember, which is very jumbled, it's a lot like if you're just meditating and existing in the moment and then you start doing something, you kind of just do it. You kind of just know. And so if you have practiced, trying to, I guess I agree a lot with the practice of meditating a lot and learning to live in the moment. But if you've done that, then you kind of just know what to do. and a lot of it has to do with emotion. So it went well for me because of my mentor, because I trusted her great. So I don't know if that helps eliminate things at all, but I use a different language, so I thought maybe that would be helpful in some way.
Thank you, Vince. Thank you.
My other question is, I assume that everybody goes through these steps, whether they've practiced or not. This is part of being a human, dying,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So,
Absolutely.
what happens if you don't have that? If you don't have someone at your bedside to, like we would have maybe a Tibetan. Someone who's practiced sitting and learned about something about Buddhism. If you don't have someone like that, or if you have not practiced during your life, these steps still take place. I'm sorry, I'm a little. I'm trying to get hold of that thought. Is that what is maybe another way of asking is this: what if you have someone there? At best, you have someone there to help you, but if you're dissolving, how do you get the help if you're not hearing and if your intelligence goes? What good does the helper do?
Because there's still some communication up through the end. I mean, your hearing may be deteriorating, but there's still some hearing going on until it's completely gone. And there's a sense of touch and other things until it's completely gone. And what a person can do to help is to help you relax, help you remember to be aware, help you to not be afraid, give you love, assurance that this isn't a terrible thing that's happening, assurance that the people who are surviving you are okay, and that they're sending you off with love and good wishes on your journey, and they're not holding on to you. And if you have Dharma friends, like a teacher or a Dharma brother or sister, who can remind you of the teachings as long as you're still cognizant, that's a great help too.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that this can be done also by a non-Buddhist. I mean, people at dying people's bedsides have been there in trying to appease the person or hold their hand or something like that. So this happens in other forms, or can happen. That's happened, I guess.
Absolutely.
Huh?
Yeah, absolutely. What you want to avoid is kind of remember the Zor with the Greek scene where that woman's dying and then everybody comes in and starts fighting over her possessions, and you want to avoid a lot of weeping and wailing around the person who's dying, both during the dying process and after, because what these teachings say is that the person's awareness stays with the body for about 3.5 days. Depends, that's just, nobody knows for sure how long or short any individual is going to be there with the body, but it stays around for a while. So what you do as a survivor is you meditate. First of all, while the person is dying, you tell them you're dying. And after they've died, after they've passed, you tell them you're dead. Because one of the worst things that can happen to a person, and it does, is that people die and don't realize they're dead. And that can be very confusing and disorienting and produce a lot of suffering. So the survivors are expressing their love. They're sending the person off with good wishes. This is what you want to do. You want to give them confidence and know that everybody here is fine and that, we're not weeping and wailing. And then once they've passed, you tell them you're dead, and we love you, and you're going to go on a journey now, and that's fine, and you're going to probably, if it's an ordinary person, you're going to take a rebirth and have a new birth, and we wish you all the well, and we love you, and we're sending you off with good wishes, like a bon voyage, And you want to do that and give the person confidence, happiness, ease.
And even if,
Can you press the button?
Yeah,
Oh, did we put batteries in there?
Anyway, you want me to get closer?
That's okay, just ask the question on the
I'm thinking that it would be difficult to have the right person at the right time, right, at your bedside. If that doesn't happen in an ideal way, just having someone there to comfort you, and even that if that person doesn't realize what phase you are, doesn't realize that, just the comforting, I guess.
Yes, comforting is good, definitely, because people are frightened, People can be very frightened, or angry that they're dying, or all kinds of things. Yeah. And what you want to do is give the person ease. Yeah. I had a close friend, not a Buddhist, and died 20 years ago of pancreatic cancer. He was determined to live, and of course he didn't. It was classic. I didn't know what pancreatic cancer was when he called up to tell me he had it. In about, when was it? It was on September 13th, 2001.
2 days after, huh?
2 days after 9/11. And he called me up to tell me he'd just been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So I called up my cousin, who's a doctor, and I asked him what it was. His response was, "Does your friend have his affairs in order?" Because the standard line, at least then, I don't know what it is today, for most pancreatic cancers, is that the normal prognosis is about 4 to 6 months from diagnosis to death. Now, there are people who live longer. I have a cousin who lived 2 years. Steve Jobs lived 6 or 7 years. But it isn't uncommon at all. And in fact, with Donald, that's exactly what happened. He was diagnosed September 13th. In October, he was determined he was going to beat it, and he married the woman he was living with at a church on Fifth Avenue wearing a pain bag strapped to his belt. And I spoke at their wedding at that pulpit on that church on Fifth Avenue. It was in about October 20th or something. And on January 6th, I think it was, I stood at the same pulpit and spoke at his funeral. And his wife told me that she was with him in the hospital at the last, and that he leapt up off the gurney, furious that he was dying. Furious. So there are all kinds of negative ways to go into death.
But at that point, if you're furious and someone is trying to appease you...
Who knows what she was doing? I don't know.
But that's what you would want, right, is to have someone there to calm you and reassure you, right?
I don't know. That's what you would want. I don't know I don't know what Donald wanted at that point.
Exactly. That's the thing, is that it may go against what that person is going through. It's kind of prevent the experience, I guess, that they need to experience at that moment.
Maybe, maybe not. I mean, there are, people in our Sangha who are trained as death doulas or as really good hospice workers. There's a terrific program here in New York to train hospice workers run by the Zen Center for Contemplative Care. You know about that on 23rd Street. And I have a couple of friends who've gone through that extensively. And I did just some workshops with Chodo and Koshin, and I have lots of friends who've had work with them. And it's terrific what they do to help the people die easily, die with more comfort, with more sanity.
But now I'm coming back to the teachings that you spoke about tonight, and they
recommend against anger. Anger's never a good thing. It's never a happy thing, never a constructive thing for anybody. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Did I stop you from talking?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question I want to ask. So I kind of get that consciousness survives death, and that I've sensed that consciousness is kind of eternal. It doesn't. You know what I'm saying. So, and I kind of get that the senses being connected with the body are going to stop at that point, the five senses. But I'm trying to understand what's going on with the sixth knowable, with thought. That is it like at the point of the physical death, is the alaya kind of still stuck to the consciousness? Is it riding along with it?
No, the alaya is dissolving.
How is it that thoughts persist?
They don't. They stop for an instant at least, depending on how much the person's practiced. It's just like anything else. You can have an enlightenment experience, as it were. Satori, the Zen tradition, and the mind stops. The thinking mind stops. Awareness doesn't stop. It's not like you're suddenly deaf, dumb, and blind. If anything, you're more intelligent. You're more aware of what's going on in the present moment, because thought is not there to obscure it.
Well, if that's the case, then it seems like there wouldn't be fear after death. But from what I'm gathering, it's navigating the Bardo could be quite fearful.
It can be if one is lost in thought. Thought's always thinking about I and other.
But you just said the thoughts don't continue. So what do you mean?
They stop for an instant.
Okay.
And in that moment, the practitioner can recognize the thoughtless, state of pure wisdom and embrace it, become one with it. It's like we all can recognize it during our lifetimes too, but the power of thought is so strong that it reasserts itself again and again and again. But if you've trained enough, they say, at that moment, the whole thing can dissolve.
How is it that thoughts return? Well, what's generating the thoughts? Where are they coming from?
That's the question that the Buddha said is not conducive to moving along the path. It doesn't tend to edification. In other words, you're asking, why does samsara happen? Why do we get confused? Why do we become unenlightened and then have to get enlightened again? And what the Buddha said is that question can't be answered. The only question that can be answered is, how does it happen? Describe it. And when you describe it, then it can become undone. There is no cause for it. It just happens. It's like thoughts are like waves in the ocean. The mind is the ocean, and the waves are the thoughts that come and go and settle back into it.
It's still interesting, though, that from what you're saying, thoughts don't seem to be connected to the body. If they could continue after the death.
right after the death of the physical body.
Right.
Yeah, that would seem to be the case. And Western medicine says thoughts, in here in the brain. The Hindu medicine says it's in the heart. But what they're actually saying is that neurotic ego mind continues on and finds a new physical body. It's like, think about it this way. At night,
But
when
that's
you're
not
dreaming.
the alaya.
Huh?
That neurotic mind is not the alaya, you're saying.
It's produced by the alaya. It comes out of the alaya. The alaya is the storehouse. It's where all your habits lie. And those habits are lying there subconscious, unconscious, as seeds, they say, in this storehouse. Seeds that have potential to bloom into full presence. And they will. And they do, for instance, at night, when you are in a purely mental place, you have no awareness of your body, right? It's you have a dream, you can be in Zanzibar, you can fly, you can do all kinds of things in your dream. It's coming out of the alaya. The alaya is producing these things from your past experience. Some good, some bad. And they happen during the daytime too, when you lapse into daydream. And you lose track of where you are. You're walking down the street and you hardly notice where you're going because you're lost in a dream.
Well, I'm in no hurry, but I'm definitely curious about all this.
I'm in no hurry either, but you never know. Like my friend David. And this happened twice in the last month. Another woman named Rahama Schechter. We did a Sukhavati for her up at Westchester Buddhist Center. And she was in my morning Zoom group where we meet to meditate every morning. She was regular 5 days a week. The other 2 days she was coaching. And she was in lots of classes at the Westchester Buddhist Center. And she contracted a flu on a Saturday. Sunday it worsened. Monday her husband was taking her to the doctor and she died in the car. And she was perfectly healthy before that. So you just never know. But the one with my friend David was even more shockingly sudden. He didn't know it was happening, presumably. So, remember the 4 reminders? These are called the 4 common preliminaries to tantric practice, Vajrayana practice. The first one is that this human birth is very precious, an opportunity to tread the path to enlightenment. And the second one is, but death is real, comes without warning. This body will be a corpse. Comes without warning. That's an interesting one. Because I've known people who knew it was coming, and still, when the moment actually occurs, they didn't quite expect it. So anyhow, we should end. Thanks, everybody.
With cheer.
Huh?
With cheer.
With cheer. Cheer up. God. And let's do the dedication of merit. By this merit may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.